behind the camera today. We're happy to be out at R.A. Jeffries in Raleigh, and we're doing another episode of the NCBeerBuzz. Thanks for having us, guys.
I'm so glad to have you.
We are sitting here today with Kelly O'Gorman, who is the craft brand manager, and Lee Aldrich, who's the craft brand representative. We are here with the craft brand folks from R.A. Jeffries, and R.A. Jeffries is a distribution company here in Raleigh. They have 3 other sites, is that right?
4.
Four other sites, so this is the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're well known to us in the community as the big Anheuser-Busch representatives for here, but they also do a lot with NC Craft Beer. We want to talk a little bit about both, but first we want to get to know something about R.A. Jeffries. So R.A. Jeffries started down east North Carolina like I did in Goldsboro.
Yeah, since 1890. So before they were actually selling a lot of different types of even livestock or eggs or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be, and then
So they were just a distribution
Right,
of anything.
right.
They put out anything.
Yes.
Right.
And then later mid 1900s expanded and became the other locations that we have now.
Uh-huh.
So the Raleigh portion has been in the past few years, but also Greenville, Goldsboro, Lumberton, Fayetteville are all represented. New Bern is represented in this territory.
And you personally have been with R.A. Jeffries for a while?
Yes, it'll be 8 years this month.
Great. And describe what you do on a kind of a daily basis. What is your job here?
So mainly I am the liaison between our breweries and the distributor. So that's anything from marketing to special events to sales, monitoring that, and making sure we're in line with what we said we were going to do,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to make sure that the breweries are happy with our numbers.
And does that liaison role also mean that if a brewer has a problem, they come to you with that? You're the kind of the contact person?
Yes.
It works both ways, the communication.
Right.
And that's different than their sales rep or route guy, who mostly is out there taking the orders and putting the beer on the shelves, and they don't get involved in the problem areas? Or
Yeah, well, they try not to get distracted with.
Right, because they've got a more
didn't-
tangible job
Yeah,
to do.
right. So we want to make sure, just looking at numbers, making sure something that didn't get delivered gets delivered,
Mhm.
trying to iron out all the details, and also look at things before they actually happen. So if we're down in sales, then we can notify them and we can make it up in another area, but trying to just keep everything in line and keep growing.
And if a brewer in North Carolina was brand new to the distribution game or not yet distributing and wanted to consider R.A. Jeffries, would they come to you as the first stop and say, let's talk?
Yeah, and we would say we would love to come visit the brewery
Sure.
to find out more about them too.
Good. We're going to get into that. So Lee, now this is, I don't think it's a secret, I'm going to tell it anyway. Lee came from Aviator.
Correct.
So he knows NC Craft Beer and one of our fine local representatives. And he's been around a couple of years, he said, with R.A. Jeffries. And your role is a little different than Kelly's.
It is.
In what way? What do you do?
I'm a little bit more of a, support role for the sales reps. Definitely spending a lot of time out on the streets, working directly with the accounts, the bar managers, and that sort of thing as well. Taking a little more time to hand sell some of our craft brands, set up samplings, and organize kind of smaller events. Let them taste the product firsthand rather than just having to sometimes sell it on merit and that sort of thing.
So if the guy off the truck who's putting the beer in the store recognizes, or if the manager comes to him and says this is an issue,
Mhm.
you may get involved, kind of ironing some things out, or talking, going in and saying, what is the problem, understanding the problem, so you can bring it back to R.A. Jeffries and help them understand better how they might fix it, tinker with it.
Absolutely. That is definitely an aspect of it that I'm here to support and help out wherever I can. And hopefully more of my role is proactive and talking about the brands and getting to sell the brands kind of before the sales rep even gets there. But when things do hit a bump and that sort of thing, I'm absolutely there to help get it sorted out.
So for our viewers who sometimes get the terms, we hear all kinds of terms going on. You guys are the craft beer side.
Right.
And of course, Anheuser-Busch and R.A. Jeffries, we know them as the national big brand. And there's a whole big brand side of the operation that you guys aren't but so involved with, I guess.
Right, to a degree.
To a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that balance out within R.A. Jeffries? I mean, I guess the huge part of what they do is the big boys.
Mm-hmm.
And are you guys the stepchildren? I mean, or the afterthought? Or, I mean, how do you hold your own against the big guys as far as the company is concerned? they have a genuine concern for craft beer. We know that because we see it out there all the time. And you've got how many North Carolina breweries now you represent?
We have 10 overall and 8
Right.
in this market.
So that's great.
I think it's more so it's the demand that's out there. So our customers are dictating the demand and how we shape the craft business here. So that's
So
a
that's
great
been-
thing that we have craft beer drinkers. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a department, and it wouldn't be constantly growing.
And that must be a big change for R. Jeffries over, let's say, the last 5 years or so, because I assume 5 years ago, if they had anybody doing craft beer, it was a very small operation because, like you said, the demand just was not there.
Right.
So as the demand grows for craft beer, you're there meeting the needs of the drinking public and of the retailers. How do you balance that out with the retailer? A retailer comes and says, you know, I want to associate with R. Jeffries, and I want you supplying my beer or some of it. I guess they don't generally go exclusive with one distributor, do they? The retailers?
They try to make it fair, but sometimes I think
They
if
spread it around.
if it's easier just to have, if they're only there at a certain time,
Right.
or they just, but yeah, generally it's spread out.
So so you would generally go in, and the default is, I guess, a mix of beers behind the
Yes.
counter. But if somebody comes and says, I want to do just craft beer, or I want to do mostly craft beer, is that something you guys can accommodate, or you generally like to see the whole array of brands you represent behind the bar?
Go ahead.
Generally, I mean, I'm happy to be as accommodating to the account. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's whatever's going to be best for them. If they're setting up a business model that's going to be craft focused, absolutely, let's set up our crafts on the draft lines. Certainly, we can probably find a place for your Anheuser-Busch products.
So they could just have all the tap handles be craft beer, North Carolina craft beer, and then maybe have bottles in the cooler or whatever else of the other brands.
Yeah,
So
and we
you're
both want
working
to
with
sell
them
the
on
most beer,
And
and
that's the whole key, I
yeah,
guess.
we don't want to sell them something that wouldn't fit their clientele. But also, they know their clientele best, and we're there to make recommendations.
Right. So, in North Carolina, so I guess our viewers know this, but at some point, a brewer by production has to associate with the distribution company. Do you know that number off? I don't know that number.
It's pretty high.
It's like
Yeah, there's
25,000
very
or-
few that have even,
Right.
or that might even breach
Okay.
that.
But, and a lot of the brand new out of the box brewers that are popping up, at first they self-distribute. So at some point, there's a gray area between they've been self-distributing, their brand recognition is starting to grow, at least in some geography, and they know it, to really bust out of the bubble, they've got to have some partner to put their beer out in places they just can't get to. So what is the sales pitch that you give them as to how a distribution a system arrangement, agreement, whatever we call this, when you partner with them? What's the advantage of that to a smallish brewer who doesn't have to come to a distributor, but may need to think about that decision?
I would say that the structure that we have most of all, so at some point a smaller brewery is going to have to make a decision. Are they going to invest in fleet vehicles? Are they going to invest in a logistical side of it where we already have that in place? We're already servicing a lot of accounts. We're already calling on a lot of accounts. We're in these accounts every week. So they either have to hire more staff, hire more vehicle, or get more vehicles, or they go with a distributor that already has these key contacts in place, and then some.
And the sales force, I guess.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because they're all out promoting their brands, but at some point, depending on their size, if they really are small, usually the salesperson has got another role somewhere. Maybe they're doing the social media, or they may work as assistant brewers. But you never know who's out repping for some of the small breweries. And you guys have dedicated salespeople who, number one, I assume, come to know the beer and the quality of the product, and can be out there pushing the beer.
Right.
And these small guys don't have that option, I guess.
And also just the structure that we have, we can also call on larger chain accounts. We have a foot in the door already because we do sell larger brands, or we just have the relationship over the years. So take your grocery chain, take your special venue, we have people dedicated to do that.
Because
all the time.
you already know, for instance, you know the buyers for Harris Teeter, or
Right.
for Walnut Creek, for the amphitheater, or for wherever we're talking about.
Right.
You guys already have the relationship. Where if I'm the brand new brewer pop out of the box, I have to go in, number one, establish the relationship, sell myself, and I guess sell the beer, which is maybe the third thing. I'm not quite sure what the order is. But you have a couple of those things already kind of checked off.
Mhm.
So the downside for the brewer then is only giving up a little bit of the gross to get you on board. Right.
And hopefully that's how they see it. I think
Yes.
just kind of in my experience coming from Aviator too, that was, you know, pretty much what you just said is I was running multiple roles. You know, I'm out there selling the first couple days of the week, doing delivery later on. You know, I was our own draft technician for draft lines and managing that, special events and everything like that. So as one sales rep for a brewery, I'm wearing 4, 5, 6 different hats.
Mhm.
Now I come over to R.A. Jeffries, and now all of a sudden you have a set up department for each one of those situations. You have a draft technician team, you have delivery, you have sales, and everything in between.
And the silos are there to support you in whatever
Absolutely.
issues are.
Absolutely. So now coming over here, I have the opportunity to focus on just sales, as I was running a sales route at the time. And now that I'm over onto the craft department, I get to specialize in just the craft brands.
Mhm.
So it's great to, I think, grow and get to that point where you can be on board with a distributor. And certainly early on, it does make sense to be able to self-distribute. But
Well, now
there's
that's
definitely a
that
point where
brings up the question that I don't know. At some small size, I
Mhm.
guess you guys aren't interested or can't really service a very small account. I mean, if they're a 5-barrel system, just kind of going around up and down the street to a few local accounts.
Mhm.
I don't want the words in your mouth, but I assume that R.A. Jeffries is not interested in that small of an account.
Well, I will say that I think that the brewery is the best face forward to selling beer.
Right.
They're going to be the most passionate. They're going to be the most dedicated behind that. One thing I have found though is, and we all go through growing pains, is that say if you have an issue, a stock issue, you have an issue that maybe the quality of the beer wasn't what you anticipated, so we have to do a recall.
Mm-hmm.
Accounts are a lot less forgiving of us than they are a brewery. So we need to make
Right.
sure that, so we want to make sure that everything is perfect as it can be before we take that step.
And that means for the small guy that he needs to be sure that he can provide the product
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, if you're out repping his beer and you come back to him and say, I need this volume in this location, and he meets the first order, and then the next week you come back to him and say, we want more, and he says, I'm sorry, I don't have beer. That's not a good problem for you, and particularly for him.
Right.
So he, she, whoever's doing the business, at some point needs to be comfortable they're ready for a distribution agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then know what your volume potential is and base goals on that. So be making sure that it's realistic too. So, okay, maybe this week we only are in 10 accounts and we keep it at that for 2 months, but then knowing that from their production side that they know where they can be and sticking to that.
And we hear we talk to a lot of brewers, and we hear some that say, I'm content to sit in my town and kind of service the town and whatever beer outlets there are in the town, and maybe 1 or 2 in the outlying towns, but I really don't want to be regional or half the state or don't want to cross state lines for sure.
Mhm.
You support them in whatever their mission is, or do you kind of wish they would, or do you kind of, is it your job ever to push them?
I think it really just, if we see the potential that's there, we can express that, but we want to make sure that we're aligning our goals with the goals of the brewery and representing their brands the way that they would represent them too.
Right.
So if they just, like I said, they just want to be small and they just want to focus on draft and that's it, and they don't want to package or they don't want to be outside of Wake County, then
Mhm.
we respect that and we'll
And
grow as they
that's what
want.
the deal is, if that's what they want.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about bottles, cans, draft. Do you know the breakdown? Have any idea how much of each you put out the door, or how it falls, how it breaks, even rough percentages?
Well, the cans are fairly new, but
Well, especially in the craft side.
Right.
yeah,
Right,
it's-
okay,
it's-
just talking craft then, all right.
Yeah, we actually sell a lot more craft on premise than we do in our off premise places. So
Alright.
I'm not sure the breakdown between cans and bottles.
Mhm.
Whereas we sell about 18 million cases a year across the board. That's
Oh,
everything.
that's everything, that's R.A.
Yeah.
Jeffries.
Yeah. So then
18
domestic,
million cases
Yeah.
a year,
That's
okay?
our entire. But that could be.
That's
everything.
package cases, that's not counting draft,
It's everything.
that's everything, okay?
Yeah. So the majority of that, when you're talking about the domestic brands, they may be more heavily, they may be more heavy on the off premise. So that's anything from convenience stores to grocery. For the craft brands, I found that we sell a lot of on premise. and then it's a larger percentage than we do in the grocery chain. And that may be sometimes access, but it's also, that's the trend now, is to support a lot of different rotating taps, a lot of new things, and it's just the buzz around the bar scene, it seems.
And then the craft can movement, of course, is coming at us. Everybody, everywhere you turn now, we hear about somebody new canning a beer.
Absolutely. Yep.
Weeping Radish, did you see Weeping Radish is canning their first beer?
Oh, yeah.
Like yesterday, they're doing a mobile can unit that's come in and bottling, canning their beer, and they're putting one beer out in a can. Don't know how wide it's going to be, but that, you know, everywhere you turn, somebody new is putting something in a can.
Absolutely.
And that's great, because they've also been around for quite some time now.
Right.
So to be able to change and
That's great.
grow.
Yeah, and they're realizing they have to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So anything we haven't gotten now? Anything you want to say about R.A. Jeffries or your role that our viewers might be interested in or need to know?
We're big supporters of craft beer, and not only distributing, but also keeping people in the know and education, and that's why we always want to put it out there of who we are, and that's why we're here today.
And you're available to talk, of course,
Yes.
to people.
Absolutely.
One thing I didn't touch on that I should have, I just remembered, festivals. You guys, we hear about R.A. Jeffries at every street fair and festival. You guys are always there, whether it's bringing the product out or your truck's holding the ice or whatever the deal is. So that's also a support role that you play, that, you know, you're kind of unique in that you can do that, or at least the distributors are unique that they can do that. Because you've got, as you said earlier, the equipment and the product and the size, that you've got a truck you can let sit there on a Saturday afternoon, not rolling anywhere, but just serving beer.
And we have a really great marketing team and special events team, dedicated guys that I wouldn't trade them for the world.
That's great. Thanks so much for your time today and for hosting us out here.
Thank you for coming.
Sure, of course. It's a great side that we haven't explored a whole lot of. So for the NC Beer guys, this has been another episode of the NC Beer Buzz. And until next time, remember, drink local and keep your beer dollars in North Carolina.